Welcome everyone to Ableton. I know you all probably had fun in Logic, but it is now time for us to move over to Ableton Live to start delving into the second unit in this course where we are going to discuss the elements of sound synthesis and a little bit of live performance. And we are going to be utilizing the DAW Ableton Live. Ableton is very much the secondary DAW that is used professionally around the world. It is equivalent to Logic in a lot of ways, but it also has a lot of unique features that really are only present within Ableton Live. Today we're just going to do a quick overview of the layout of Ableton Live, and we will go into each aspect of Ableton in separate videos. So when you first open a project within Ableton, you will be greeted with this screen here. This is more or less its default view, and what we were actually looking at is session view. Now, I like to differentiate between the views within Ableton because there are two different views in which you can work within. There is session view, and then there's also arrangement view. And to toggle between the two, there are two little buttons up here in the upper right hand corner. Right now, this bottom one is highlighted. This is session view. If I go ahead and click this top one, I will be transported to arrangement view. This is the view that is more traditional to use within DAWs. You've got all of your channels laid out horizontally, and you can compose from left to right or from start to beginning. If we go back to session view, you'll notice that we have everything set up more in a mixer format, and that is because this portion of Ableton is meant to be used as a way of composing in chunks or in specific elements, or even within just composing one bar at a time by utilizing all of the different loops and clips available within session view. And you can have an infinite number of clips and scenes, which we discuss in our deep dive of session view, and we can have essentially an infinite number of channels as well. Now, there's one quick way that I think it would be good for you to get used to switch between session view and arrangement view, and that is by hitting tab on your keyboard. If you hit tab on your keyboard, that will just toggle between the two views. I'm doing it right now. And it's good to just remember that, because as we start working on a project, and especially when you get into the final stages of the project, you will want to be moving between the two different views in order to finalize your project. Okay, so let's go ahead and move up to the top bars here. So the top toolbar within Ableton is essentially functions the same way as it would in any other DAW, especially like in Logic. It has all the same functionalities. We've got all of our tempo controls and meter controls over here. We've got our global transport over here. And then over here, we've got some controls that are specific to recording loops and tapping in and tapping out of loops when recording. Now, just really quickly, over here in our section where we will be manipulating tempo and meter, we've got a tap function, which allows us to essentially tap out a tempo if we wanted to tap out a tempo. Or to the right of that, you can just enter in whatever tempo you want, or just type it in just by clicking in there. If you want to reset it back to its default, just double click it, and it always defaults back to 120. These features here are nudge left, nudge down, and nudge up, or nudge back, nudge forward. I go over those in our deep dive in session view. To the right of that, we've got our time signature, or our meter that we can work within. We can change that to whatever meter we want. Go all the way up to 16, all the way down to 1, and you can go all the way up to however many you want there. I recommend just leaving it in 4/4 in the first couple projects that you do within Ableton, and then once you get more comfortable with how everything works, you can start experimenting with different meters, and that is a really fun thing to do within Ableton. It really works seamlessly. To the right of that, we've got our metronome, and you can turn it on by just clicking on it. Right now I have it set to enable only while recording, so if I deselect that, we will hear our metronome. You can hear it there. And if you click the little drop down to the right of it, you can assign a count in, which I go over that, the importance of that within session view. You can change the sound to whatever you want. I usually just leave it on the classic. It's fine with me. You can change the rhythm or the subdivision, I like to say. So let's say we wanted, right now it's just beating a quarter note at 120. So let's say we wanted to beat eighth notes. We are now getting the eighth note division within our piece, or the eighth note triplet, or the 16th note. This is more helpful if you have a slower tempo, say like 80, and you want to work in with some triplets, and you want to just make sure those are all on grid properly. It's good to have those subdivisions in there. Now to the right of that, we've got our global quantization grid within Ableton, and what this does is this essentially controls when loops will either start or stop or tap in or tap out. It defaults at 1 bar. I recommend leaving it at that for your first assignment within Ableton, and then start messing around with it as you start building up a larger group of loops within session view and are getting ready to start messing around with live performance and recording your arrangement. But you have all sorts of options there, all the way down to the 32nd note and all the way up to 8 bars. To the right of that, we've got our global transport. Like I said, we've got play, stop, and record. Now, an important distinction to make within Ableton Live is that there are multiple play functions, multiple record functions, and multiple stop functions. And that simply just has to do with the fact that Ableton is heavily geared towards live performance, and they are wanting to enable users to be able to play specific clips. So for instance, if I double click in any of these regions, that opens up clips, which I go over what those are in session view. But just for demonstration, you notice that I have 3 different play buttons here. Those are playing those individual clips, and you'll see up here that my project is also playing globally as well. So if I were to hit record up here in my global project, it is going to record over my entire project. And if we go to arrangement view, you'll see that it's recording directly in arrangement view. However, you don't always want that to be the case within Ableton. So if I go back to session view by hitting tab, sometimes you just want to record within each of these clips. And so there is also record functions here with all of these record buttons here when you enable recording on each clip. So like I said, I go into more detail on that with our deep dive into session view, but just realize that there are multiple ways to play and stop sound within Ableton. If you ever want to just get a hard reset of your project back to 1.1, just double click the stop button on our global transport. And then over here, we've got controls to allow us to, when recording loops, it says if we have this selected, it won't start recording until it enters the 3rd bar. And if we have this back one selected, it will stop recording once we've finished that 1 bar loop. So that's just an easy way to keep from accidentally recording over anything. You can go ahead and mess around with that. That is mainly useful for recording directly into arrangement view. All right, so now moving down into the rest of our project. Like I said, this is session view. On our far right of session view, and this will always be the case, we have our master out, our equivalent to stereo out or master out within any other DAW. This is essentially the final gain stage of our project where you can control final levels or anything such as that. To the left of that, we've got our return tracks, and these automatically are pre-wired for us within Ableton, and you can add as many of those as you want as well. And then we've got our workspace over here. I treat this as like my notebook or my sketchpad within Ableton. And then down below session view, we've got a work area that will pop up whenever you open up a clip. So if I were to open up this clip, I just double clicked on it and it opens up a piano roll, just like you would see in a standard MIDI sequencer, where you can then input notes in as you wish. And we talk about that some more and recording directly into clips with a MIDI keyboard in session view. So this is our work area. You will see this is where all of your MIDI information will be recorded, and then this is also where you will see where you will manipulate instruments and audio effects. So if I were to drag an instrument onto this track, it pops up down here with my instrument, and then if I were to add any sort of effects onto the track, they pop up down here in this work area as well. And it really does a great job of just displaying the actual flow of a signal within the project. Remember, everything in this area of Ableton flows from left to right. So the signal starts here with the arpeggiator, flows through our wavetable and into our compressor, and then out to our master. Okay, so now that since we've already talked about instruments, let's go ahead and go over here to our libraries or our categories. So we've got a whole bunch of categories here. We've got sounds, drums, instruments, audio effects, MIDI effects, Max for Live, plugins, clips, and samples. Sounds are essentially the pre-made sound packs that come with Ableton when you download them, and they are organized as you would expect. You can get demos of them just by clicking on them to hear them. This is good if you just want to get a stock sound to start working with and you want to just start creating right away without having to create your own sounds. This is a good way to do that. However, for the purposes of this class, we will be designing all of our sounds from scratch. So I recommend not becoming too dependent on these when you first start working within Ableton. However, they do provide great inspiration as to how many different types of sounds you can create, and gives you some ideas on what to go after when creating your sound. So that's the sounds. Below that, we've got drums. So this is just all of our pre-built drum kits within our project. They've got the classics, 808s and 909s, and then they've got some more esoteric ones down here like Mad Mollusk or Yakiman, So Future. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And then they've even got a blank drum rack here that you can then, if I were to drag this onto my second MIDI track, you see it's blank, and you can actually drag samples onto this yourself, either samples from Ableton or samples that you've recorded yourself to create your own custom drum rack. Below that, we've got our instruments. This is where we will be starting with all of our sound creation with all these instruments. These are basically software synthesizer emulators. And we have all types of synthesis present here, from additive, subtractive to FM and wavetable and physical modeling, and anything in between that you can think of is present within these packs. Now, within each of these packs, you can hit a drop down and it gives you some sounds that are built based on these instruments. So it's just a further level of organization of all of the sounds. You will see some duplicate sounds from this category of sounds in the instruments, and that's just because they're now being organized based on instrument. Again, however, we will be working with creating our own sounds from scratch. So every time you want to create a new sound, instead of clicking the drop down like in Operator, what I would do is instead just click on Operator and then drag that into my project and start from there. And we're working with the default blank view of the synthesizer. Okay. Below that, we've got our audio effects. These are essentially all the same effects that you would see in Logic or any other DAW that you might have worked on before. There might be a few that aren't within those, but they're all pretty straightforward. If you just want to add them to your project, like the saturator, just click and drag it down here into this bottom area, and it adds onto our project. You can also go into, they've got some pre-built presets there. We can get some, like a soft shaper in there, and that you just click and drag all of the effects into the project, and they always go after the instrument. Below that, we've got our MIDI effects, and these are just like the sound, MIDI effects, and they essentially process MIDI data before it is sent to an instrument. We will talk about that in class and how that works, but just the quick thing to note is that we've got arpeggiators, chords, everything that you can think of that you want for a MIDI effect. And all you need to do is just click, like let's say we want, like any of these randoms, like chaos. All you need to do is just click, and you can either drag that straight onto the channel or down here into the project, and you'll notice that it goes in front of the instrument, like I said before. Important to note, audio effects can go on MIDI tracks and audio tracks. However, MIDI effects can only go on MIDI tracks because MIDI effects are processing MIDI information, and audio tracks do not have any MIDI information within them. Below that, we've got Max for Live. This is where a lot of custom packs are placed for Ableton that utilize the Max for Live feature, which is essentially a graphical programming software. This has some really cool effects in it and some really cool instruments. You can mess around with it a little bit. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time in this class to dive too deeply into Max for Live, but this is a really big selling point for a lot of producers and a lot of performers to use Ableton because of this integration of Max MSP. Below that will be any third-party plugins that you have on your computer, and then any clips, and then below the clips are samples. This is all of the samples that are used to create everything that there is within Ableton. You can see how many there are. So you can use these samples to create your instrument racks or your drum racks or your samplers or whatever you want, or you can also add your own samples in from your own library. And then below that, we've got our places where it says where all of our stuff is. We've got a user library and then a current project, which is everything that has to do with the project that you're currently working on. All right, so that's the library, and that is the general overview for Ableton Live and its layout. If you are ever unsure about something, there is this area on the left, which is an info view that will kind of give you quick information on whatever your mouse is hovering over. So, for instance, browse clips, click here to access all of your installed live clips, and then all of that. And so if you're ever unsure, check out the info view. It'll give you a brief rundown as to what you're hovering over. And then there is a help function within Ableton. Help view brings up this in software help view, kind of like a lesson plan, I guess you can say. You can take a tour of live if you want. Or if you want some more specific help, you can read the manual or visit ableton.com. The help section on ableton.com is really helpful, and there are a lot of great video tutorials on Ableton if you wanted to get some more in-depth information on whatever you are working in within Ableton. So once again, that is just a general overview of the layout of Ableton. I hope this was helpful, and in future videos, we will be going over deep dives into session view, into instruments and how you can use them and how you can design different sounds within the instruments. And then we will go into some more advanced topics that are to be announced. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to use the help function and or just email me with the questions, or write them down and ask them when we have our class with regards to whatever section we are working on. So this is Ableton Live. I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I do, and I will see you guys in the next one.